We are coming to the last part of this conference, and I'm delighted to welcome Professor Emeritus Dzulkifli bin ABDUL RAZAK. He is best known in the education community as Professor Dzul. Dzul, I hope you are here today with us already. And yes, wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Professor Dzul is the Rector of the International Islamic University in Malaysia. And you have been a Vice Chancellor of the university from 2000 to 2011. We got to know you when you were still the President of the International Association of Universities, which is a UNESCO-affiliated organization, and very much in line also with what we are doing, promoting internationalization, promoting sustainability, and the Agenda 2030. You have been the first Asian recipient of the prestigious 2017 Gilbert Medal, which recognizes your outstanding achievements in internationalization. You are a fellow of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, the World Academy of Art and Sciences, and the World Academy of Islamic Management. And I can continue, Dzul, to introduce you and present your credentials, but I invite participants to read your bio later and also see more what kind of work you have been doing. We are very pleased that you are here with us today and give a closing keynote, an inspiring, encouraging closing keynote. And we know that we have 10 minutes, excellent time ahead of us. Thank you so much, Dzul.
Okay. Thank you very much for this, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really very honored to be with this very august meeting. I've been listening to what you have been talking about since morning, and I hope I can add a little bit more of the kind of problems and the confusion that we're going to face as we move into the future. I have taken a position to talk about the post-COVID-19 perspective, something that we have been thinking of maybe 2 years ago before COVID comes in. Now COVID comes in, it becomes even more compelling to talk about what we call now the movement or the shift from the 3M to the 4M to the 4-ish kind of a model that I will quickly go run through. So in the 10 minutes, let me quickly articulate some of the issues that we have been talking about. I'm sure we've been talking about the question of access and success, given the kind of crisis that we've got, be it locally, institutionally, regionally, nationally, and also the global kind of issue that all of us are now facing, given the COVID-19. We are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goal, particularly goal number 4 that talks about inclusive, equitable, lifelong, and I would like to add the life-wide learning, which is also very opportune now, that we find that we need to move from sectors to sectors, context to context, so that we learn a lot more in terms of experience. But nevertheless, whatever we are trying to do, the whole issue that there are still a lack of access around the world is something that we are not able to deny. I think this is an issue that has been there for a long time, but now perhaps there comes a time where COVID pushes us into thinking of what the issue is all about. This is not new. I think many people have been talking about it, but given the other imperative of COVID-19, we begin to, at least I begin to look at very specific focus of what we can do in the immediate future so that we can save the younger generation as they move along. I think the question of wealth gap, this has been well articulated in many of the discussion I overheard in terms of social mobility, breaking out of poverty, and this issue of disparity in terms of incomes, in terms of divides. I think is an issue that we need to come into terms with. But we have not discussed a lot more, I think, in these 2 areas that I would want to belabor on in this 10-minute discussion, the question of lessons for life. What do we learn from life? I think the COVID-19 has put us in a kind of a box that we need now to understand what is it that we are talking about when we talk about life vis-a-vis livelihood. All the while, education has been about livelihood. Life is somehow rather put at the back burner because we think if livelihood is good, then life will be better. And it's not the case as far as COVID-19 is concerned. And that has something to do very closely with the kind of values that we advocate in education system. And that's another big question mark that we are asking ourselves now. What sort of values are there now within education system, apart from just the logic of economics? What other value systems are we talking about? So in our model, as it were, we begin to see and understand this level of access, given the kind of structure of education, which is almost factory-like, whether we like it or not. The people that comes out are very meant for these three things of employment, innovation, and high tech, which we summarize at the end of the day, manpower, mind, and machine, which is basically for market. The market will employ them, and these are almost all about livelihood. So the 4 M's for us is basically now, as we look at it, very much technological based. Everybody, I think, in this seminar, even other seminars, are all talking about technology, online learning, and so on and so forth, which is not wrong, but I think we are missing some points here. There's a book called the Fourth Education Revolution that talks about the factory model of education has failed to conquer the enduring problems of inequity and unfairness, which I read about inaccessibility. If this conference is about accessibility, then I think we need to look back and see whether the kind of education system that we provide in the post-industrial way is basically something that we want to continue. So technology, while it is important, we have lost what I call a sets of values. We are talking about KPIs, we are talking about ranking, we are talking about exams, we are talking about all the tangibles that is supposed to be important. But as we can see, when the COVID comes in, these numbers becomes unimportant anymore. Schools close down, factory close down, the numbers becomes nonsensical to a certain extent, and everybody is looking at how do we now manage COVID without even using technology in the first place. We talk about cleanliness, we talk about distancing, we talk about anything, but not crafted in the way that high tech used to make us think. So I begin to believe that there are other things that we need to think about and other things that we need to teach that we have basically lost. And this is what I want to call what I call not just disruptive education. Disruptive education, normally people talk about technology. I'm going to add the word bio there. Bio means how do we disrupt ourselves as students, as teachers, as learners, to make sure that we are well into this new kind of education system so that access can be better understood and better weighed. So if I were to say what is this 4 issues that we are talking about, is a movement between manpower to humanity. We are not able to talk about just our country, our institution, our region, but we need to talk about humanity as a whole. This is something that is happening today. We are not able to eliminate COVID-19 until we talk about humanity as a group of persons who actually goes and have social solidarity to fight this. We are not able to talk about COVID without talking about feelings, the question of heart, right? We are not able to talk about just high tech, but we also need to talk about high touch. What do I mean by this? Actually, we are going to talk about how do we organize life? How do we students through education system organize life so that life becomes more intimately linked with us rather than just livelihood? So we need to move from technology-based entirely to what I call societal-based. And that societal-based is something that I would want to talk about, the kind of values that is ingrained into the society that we're in. We need to learn about the values of sympathy. If you want to talk about humanity, you must learn how to sympathize. Otherwise, you will not understand what humanity is all about. Some of the problems, at least, are very far away, and we are not able to understand it if we don't understand sympathy. We do not understand what we need to do until we also learn to empathize, where we can do and work and give our sort of contribution to society. Poverty, for example, we are not able to learn about poverty in our classroom or in an air-conditioned room or just by reading books. You need to go and engage yourself. with the poor and really understand what poverty is all about. And that's where the value of education becomes more enhanced. And we also need to learn about compassion in the way that we do not care who is involved, but it becomes our duty to help and to lift up everybody who needs our help in the context of education or anything like that. So in other words, we begin to define what humanizing life is all about. And we are talking about values vis-a-vis value when we talk about the marketplace. And therefore, I think to improve access, we must begin to talk about value-based education. And the value-based education would tell us that we need now to transform the education system away from just technology, but to infuse the value system or to blend it together so that it has more meaning when you talk about technology vis-a-vis the value that we want to promote, and hence bring back the soul into education, the question of resilience, the question of, coping, the question of understanding and building intercultural sort of dialogue between people as part and parcel of education. And therefore, when we talk about this, we begin to understand with sets of values, we already begin to understand that we can push away COVID without use of technology in a very intense way. There's no vaccine until now, but many parts of the world, except maybe a few in the West, are able to contain this. Singapore is a good example. Korea, Japan, many of the Far Eastern countries have good example of how we contained it. In other words, we're able to flatten the curve, as it were. And moving into the future is about flattening the curve using values per se, rather than just relying on technology. And in this context, I would like to also emulate and say we need now to flatten the curve of education if we want to receive or to make accessibility more prevalent among people who are marginalized, the group that I've been talking about, women, children, non-traditional, or even people with special disabilities as such. In other words, we need to begin understanding the values of justice, the values of equity, the values of equality. Yeah, we need to understand that all life matters. It doesn't matter who is involved, but all life matters, including that of animals. This is the value that we want to put into education so that we begin to live as a platform for human beings actually to share. And it doesn't matter where they are, it doesn't matter who they are. This is the kind of value system that we need to put in place. And therefore, the question of access and success becomes the crux of this whole issue. And until and unless we get this right, we will not be able to talk about what access could do as we move forward in this post-COVID-19. In our case, we have introduced another way of looking at this. Instead of talking of just a KPI, the numbers that we talked about, we're beginning to interpret what does KPI means. KPI means in terms of KIP. And what is KIP? KIP is a key intangible performance. The number that you always shout about to show that you are good, what does it mean? What does it translate into intangible numbers so that it can be used as a value to promote humanity, to promote compassion, and to promote people living together in this particular context. So if you work on this, I think we should be able to arrive at a certain point where we find that accessibility could be open. People now are beginning to live with one another in a very compassionate way. There's no competition as such, but how to collaborate and lift everyone up as a way to prosper your neighbor rather than to beggar their neighbor, as what education is now seen as, no longer as a leveler of society, but more of a source and equity throughout the world. That, I think, is the way to do it. And I think the way to do it is to put education back into the societal sort of base values rather than just looking at technology. Well, technology is important, but I don't think it is panacea to solve issues of access with success at the same time. So I think my 10 minutes is up. I would like to thank you for this. And if there's any question, if you can discuss, I would be happy to do so. So thank you very much, Riano, for the invitation and for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jewel, for this absolutely inspiring closing remarks, telling us how to move from the 4M to the 4H. and sharing with us what education with soul means. And I actually asked in the chat, we have time for 2 to 3 questions, and they came immediately, Jewel. And
Yes.
probably if we wait a bit longer, we will spend here the whole afternoon discussing and sharing with you this. So let me start with one question by Pino Jose. How do we, as a small fish in the large ocean, instigate leadership to be oriented towards this brilliant philosophy that you have just shared, Dr. Jewel? As teachers on the front line, we believe in this truly, but we feel let down often when our administrative leaders show absolutely no empathy. Jewel, what is the recipe here?
Again, Len, I really cannot get the question again. Can you just repeat?
So Pino Jose, he compliments you on this absolutely brilliant philosophy which you have shared with us. And I assume that Pino is a teacher at the front line, and he wants to implement it. He wants to instigate this leadership philosophy, but he feels that his administration does not show any empathy at all. So how can you overcome this barrier?
This is exactly our issue today, because we have defined education the way it is not. It does not look like education to me. We are always talking about education in the context of employment, employability, which I do not deny. But what sort of people are we going to employ at the end of the day is the issue. What is the value that you are going to embed in him or her? I think that is the issue that we need to talk about now. How do you put this value in? Not only among students, but also in teachers. In our university, we have quote unquote retrained most of our lecturers and make them understand these are the values that needs to be together with education. Education without those values, we will not mean education to us. It could be, upskilling, whatever names you want to put it, but it's not an education per se, because it do not transform the person. Education for us is about transforming the person first before they can be a good engineer, a good doctor, a good politician. We train them to be a good engineer, but at the end of the day, we find that they are not a good person. So we have question of corruption, ethically, and all these divides that we talked about, meaning to say that we don't understand, how do I relate to you? How do I relate to my neighbors? How do I relate to the person around me? That is what education is all about, to bring this social solidarity that COVID talks about. Without social solidarity, we will be eaten up by COVID tomorrow. And how do you get this social solidarity, social bonding? We even use the wrong word. We use social distancing, when it actually should be physical distancing. And no educators make any correction on this. Social distancing means you are running away from society. You just look after your own self without bothering what the society is going through. And you see this a lot in US and in the UK, when people say, I matters, the society do not matter. So these are issues that I think we need to get into when we talk about values. How do we define ourselves as a human being that can live together in a planet that is already in ailing state? How do you leverage that? And I think this is where education should begin post-COVID, I think. It's a lot of work, but through your organization, to some of the universities that wants to work through this, for example, our 3M and 3H is really a way to push forward. We have now reorganized all our curriculum now, so that from next year, we have a new set of curriculum, new set of values, and new sets of activities. Every student now needs to go to the community and work with the community and understand what the community is all about. That wasn't there before, because everybody talks about just the industry. Now we understand under COVID, the industry collapsed. The industry do not even talk about employment anymore. They can close and say, we don't want to employ you, but the university cannot do that. We cannot say, I'm going to close the university tomorrow because there's no employment for you. We still need to go on. So who is the more reliable partner? For me, is the community. The community is there with you, and you need to work with the community as well. If the industries are there, we can go with industry. Otherwise, we need to find new partners and find new stakeholders at the same time for the survival of the future. Long answer, but I hope it makes sense.
Thank you, Jewel. It made fully sense, and we have, however, more questions after this. You mentioned social solidarity, the role of the individuals, the role of teams, communities, and then obviously the society at large. Our speaker, Dr. Tiffany Cohen, has one question on the role of higher education institutions, and I read it from the chat, if you allow me. How do you engage higher education institutions in an exercise of self-reflection that would nurture this model of humanizing and value-based education? Can you go a bit more in detail the role of higher education institutions and how you maybe practice it also at your university?
Yeah, we are talking about repurposing higher education. I think education has lost its way. I think it lost its way in this industrial revolution of the 1700s when we go into mass production. That we become part and parcel of the new words now we call human capital. We are no longer human beings. And this is why I worry when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution. It is a long continuum from the first, second, and third industrial revolution. The name may be different, but I think the context is still the same. It is about us working with the industry, supporting the industry, but not knowing actually what is a return for us as a human being. I think this is the issue that has not been talked about. If we talked about the fourth industrial revolution in its very technical form, we're going to produce a group of people called the post-humans. We're going to produce another group called the transhuman. These do not come into our vocabulary in education. When this group of people comes in, of course, now we talk about non-traditional, all these other, community that needs to be given education. What about these new trends of people coming? I mean, if you read the discourse of the transhumanists in the internet, you are really very worried about it. Some of them claim that, they are more brilliant than human beings put together. Now, how do we deal with this problem if education is still following the trend of the Industrial Revolution without superseding it? I think that is the role of education. Education has been put in a way that we need now to move as fast as the industry is moving. We lose time to reflect. We have no time to reflect whether what we are doing is the right thing to do. We keep on responding reactively sometimes to the demand of the market, to the demand of the industry, that we lose our sense of purpose as institution of higher education. And we are marked on that. If you are good in the ranking, then they say you are good. You can be number one, but what value do you propose? You can be number two, but what is it that you have done? I mean, if you look at the scenario today, I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but the world's best universities are all in the places where now COVID is doing havoc. We should have thought the world-class university would have solved this problem, but they are not solving the problem. So where have we gone wrong? What is a world-class university if your society is inundated with COVID and now you have to do lockdown for the whole country? I begin to question where are we in understanding what education is now, and post-COVID is telling us the anatomy of education moving forward. If we don't learn from this, I think we'll probably get stuck into another pandemic, which is called now mental health. Mental health will be the other pandemic that most of our students are not able to cope. At least in my university, you can see the number of people depressed, the number of anxiety, the number of stress are going up. Meaning to say we have not able to give them the basic of being resilient, of coping when the environment changes, because we are so comfortable with the old model that the new model do not come into being at all. I hope we can still make this transaction as we move forward, hopefully.
Jewel, I look at the chat. I have 25 new messages now for you, questions and comments. I'm struggling to address them all, so I pick one which I think summarizes the thoughts and the feelings and the understanding of our participants right now. And this person says, you have unlocked a lot of thought-provoking ideas and you have opened our minds and hearts as well. Jewel, absolutely fantastic. At the end of this conference, we not only enjoyed it thoroughly, but we really learned so much again from you. After knowing you for such a long time, you always not surprise us, but you always, well, surprise us always with new thoughts and and know which path to go. So let's try to walk from 4M to 4H, and take our participants and speakers along, and probably hand over with this message also soon to our European counterparts who will continue the WAHED conference in Europe. Thank you, Jewel.